Okay, good afternoon. It's 12:30. Welcome to Corporate Services Committee. We have a relatively light agenda. That doesn't mean we can expand to fill the time. So I'll look for on consent item, or first of all, any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing no hands waving. Items 2 through 6. Anyone want anything pulled? Numero 4, Councillor Morgan. Any others into number 4? Okay. I'm sorry, which one, Councillor?
Number 6.
Number 6. Okay. So items 2, 3, and 5. I'll take a motion on those items, please. Seconder. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? I'll call that question.
Motion carries 5-0.
And item number 4, I'll look to the honourable member from Ward 7.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions about this particular report. I obviously expressed some interest in hearing from our clerk staff when the news broke that the Bill 68 amendments had passed, and although they're not in force and effect yet, they progressed through the provincial legislative bodies relatively well. But there are a number of things in here, and I will also recognize, before I get into it too far, I recognize that there are a number of components of regulations that need to come forward that will outline much of the detail, much like when the ranked ballot legislation came forward that was really in the regulations that outline the rules. As many of these details will be in the regulations, my questions are probably more general in nature with the exception of a few. But do we anticipate, so there are a number of policy changes that we'll end up having to make stemming from the regulations. And in some cases when it becomes in force and effect, but they won't do that until the regulations are out. Is there going to be a time window that we have to bring forward the policy changes? And have we begun some of the work on what are the expected policy changes that are required under the legislation that we would need to make?
Through the chair, we do not have a lot of information in terms of content of the regulations, which will impact what we put in the policies. We can certainly tell you at this point in time, we have made contact with the Integrity Commissioner to make sure he is aware, as he was, about the changes to the legislation, because the Code of Conduct is one policy, obviously, at the outset that's going to be need to be looked at, and we're also going to determine whether or not we amend that to incorporate local boards and commissions, or we set a separate Code of Conduct in that regard. In terms of some of the other policies, there are a number which you would have noticed in the report that have to be amended, and some of that detail is required from those regulations in order for us to move forward. If I refer you to page 15, at the top of that page, the pregnancy leaves and parental leaves of members of council, we'll be able to move forward on that fairly quickly, and obviously we'll work with HR on that. That does have some human resource implications in terms of that piece. The tree canopy, natural vegetation in the municipality, that will take some work with our appropriate staff. We do have, of course, the forest strategy, so we'll be working with them, and we'll see with what's in the regulations whether or not we can simply use that policy statement to refer to our strategy in that regard. In terms of the relationship between members of council and the officers and employees of the municipality, again, we're going to have to take a good look at that. We do have our civic administration bylaw, but we fully expect that we'll have to have a policy that ties that into that other piece as well. So some of it we've got in place, bits and pieces in another form, so it's a matter of tying that all together once we know what the regulations say to make sure that we meet all the requirements.
A couple more questions, and again, I recognize if you can't answer some because of the regulations, I'll certainly be happy to wait until they come out. With respect to the obligations and some of the members, with respect to pecuniary interest, where written declarations will need to be made, would we anticipate that being a procedure, or are we just, I guess this would be in the regulations, like whether we're required to submit on a template? And on the registry, do we know yet any information about whether the registry that we would develop would go backwards in time, as pecuniary interests sometimes change in time based on changes in employment and that sort of thing, how those would be updated, or is that simply something we have to wait for the regulations for?
In terms of go forward or grandfathered, we will have to wait for those regulations to come forward. We did anticipate developing some sort of a template that would make it easy and consistent for the council members to submit in writing what their disclosures are. And then we would envision that template enabling us to perhaps scan that document into a folder where we could produce that at any given time in terms of the disclosures.
Just two more questions. Is there any resources that you anticipate needing to be required to move quickly on some of these items, and perhaps you need the regulations to know this for sure? There are some that obviously are of importance to me, that when they come into force and effect on proclamation, we want to have procedures, expectations and stuff outlined. Certainly the pecuniary interest one is one that, needs to happen right away. But also the ability for members to participate in a vote, but not vote in participation of a meeting by electronic means. I certainly feel that the full participation of our members as soon as possible after it comes into force and effect is something that we want to be prepared for, even if they can't vote. And so what I'm saying is there are some things that I think are very important for us to be ready to go, even if they're optional. And I'm wondering if you expect some sort of significant workload given the anticipation of the work that you see coming out of these, knowing that, the scope of that work might be impacted by the actual regulations.
There is definitely going to be some work involved, and as I say, it's going to be cross-departmental as well on the varied issues. In terms of involving councillors at the earliest possible date in participating in meetings, we are going to have to explore, and we'll obviously be bringing IT in on this, our options for that. Having our meetings in the council chambers presents a little bit different scenario than, say, meeting in committee room number 3, where we can put a telephone pod in the middle of the table. So it does present some challenges. We are going to have to take a look at what our options are, and obviously that's something that's going to be available, and I suspect council members will want to take advantage of. So if there's costs associated, we'll also have to work with finance to determine a source of financing for that.
So my last couple questions, or maybe it's just one, is on the Integrity Commissioner. So obviously we've appointed an Integrity Commissioner with a certain parameters and scope to the position. There are some expanded powers here. In the options in the legislation, it basically says if you have one and it's doing this, that's great. If you don't, you need to make some changes right away. The report seems to assume that you may end up for part of this going to another municipality's Integrity Commissioner, but I also presume that you could just simply renegotiate and expand the scope of our current Integrity Commissioner to include some of these duties. And then based on the answer to that, I have one final question.
Yes, through the chair. If the report implied that we're possibly looking at going to another municipality, that was not the intent. It was just simply covering the provisions of the legislation. That option is available. We are fortunate in that we have identified and engaged an Integrity Commissioner. We have had initial conversations with them about the changes to the legislation, and if it's necessary to renegotiate what's involved there, we will certainly proceed on that basis. And of course, some of that will be impacted again, as I say, by how we handle our local boards as well. That will have an influence as well.
So my final point is, and please feel free to comment on this if you have some information, is with respect to our current integrity commissioner, my expectation would have been, since he's been on the job for well over a year now, is that we would have had some sort of update to council on some of the things that my expectation was that he would be tasked with, whether that was a review of the terms of our code of conduct and providing some suggestions and advice to it, reporting on the activities that he's engaged in. I don't even know how much he's actually cost us from the perspective of having this person, when he does work, it costs us money. When he doesn't, I have no idea the scope of what he's been engaged in. When can we expect that, or do we have to make a motion to request him to come here? What's the process for hearing from the integrity commissioner on an annual basis, as was my expectation, and do we need to do something to have him come, or is there something planned in the near future?
That actually is in the works. We had made provision for the integrity commissioner to report back on an annual basis. That is a requirement. And contact has been made with the integrity commissioner. I know that is in progress. And certainly, as I say, that was all part of the conversation that the city clerk had with the integrity commissioner, almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago. I believe next week, upon her return to the office, that that conversation will resume. So I would expect in the not too distant future, you will be seeing exactly what you were hoping to find.
Great, and thank you for that. And just a general comment on the report, I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think it is a good comprehensive review of the legislation and the impacts on the different components of the corporation. It gives us a good first look of where our obligations are, what we have to think forward to, and also makes clear that there are obviously some details that we don't have yet that we need to have to understand the full scope and impact of the work that is ahead on this. But thank you very much for a comprehensive report, and I will look forward to hearing when the integrity commissioner can come and speak to us on not just this, but a number of other components of his job.
Anyone else on this particular item? Councillor Park.
Thank you. Just off the hop, I wanted to thank staff for the chart here within the report. It's quite good, and it really shows how effective the City of London, both at the political end and the administrative level, were at really hammering home what was important to change in the Municipal Act. I think one of the points that I'd like to reiterate for the community to be aware of is that a change that's quite important with regard to giving citizens, other elected officials, or perhaps even staff, and increased accountability tools when it comes to elected officials. Historically, if a member of the public, for example, thought that an elected official had contravened the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, the financial burden would be on that person. I love the change that now the financial burden's where it should be with the local board or municipality. I think that's quite important. I've heard from a few people that have made complaints to various integrity commissioners across the province, only to be very frustrated when they were told, okay, if you thought that they breached the act, sorry, you have to cough up however many dollars to go to the judge. So I think that's a very good thing, and it gives some elected officials no more cover to hide under. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one, I want to highlight one little thing if I could. On page 14, it's interesting that there's a change in this committee, or certainly the audit committee experienced this, that in a trade secret, this is item H1, scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board. We ran into that with audit committee of what was proprietary information, and you know, there was a bit of a back and forth with the clerk's office of whether it was appropriate to go in camera or not, and I think they're making an appropriate move to allow that, and starting to treat organizations as persons before the law as they are considered everywhere else and under every other statute in the province or in the country, frankly. But so I think that's a good change. I think I appreciate the clerk being proactive as well on the integrity commissioner bringing a report back. I think the chart's interesting because the number of things that were suggested and not adopted actually almost overwhelms the number of things that were adopted, and that's a little perplexing. Let's just put it that way. So I'll call the question on item number 4. Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Seconder, please. Councillor Helmer, thank you.
Motion carries 5-0.
Sorry, I assumed. Councillor Usher, you pulled item number 6, the strategic plan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a brief question, and really I wanted to ask Human Resources about a question before I came here, but so I don't want to take them by surprise. So if they don't have the answer, that's okay. I read this with all due respect, and I just wondered if this is an appropriate place for me to ask it, but I would like to know where we stand with respect to that portion of our strategic plan to do with internship, both the 4-month internship term as well as the 12-month internship term for foreign trained professionals. What happened is that when we did the budget portion of this, the 12-month portion, which is the foreign trained professionals, is supposed to take effect from this year onwards, and we have money in the budget for that. And I know that there's been some actions, but I just wondered, and if staff doesn't have the answer now, they could give it to us later on, but if they have it now, if they could give us some indication of where we are with that.
Veronica, I think that was in a fairly recent report, so maybe you could just update us on that, please.
Through the chair, I believe that in terms of our 4-month internship programs, we advertise those twice a year. And I will need to go back to confirm. I believe the next advertisement around of those is this September, but I will confirm that and report back to you in respect to that. And then with respect to our 12-month internship programs, my understanding is that one of those positions is filled. We did have both of the positions filled, but one of the candidates actually obtained permanent employment, and so has moved on. So we're going out again to fill that position. So the program is working in that respect. And we had one in, but we lost one. So
I don't want to take up everybody's time on this, but I'd like opportunity to discuss this a little further, to understand this a little bit more with staff at some time.
I'd encourage you to do that with Ms. Major. Okay. Would you like to move that item, please? Councillor Helmer.
So first of all, I think that this is an improvement. I think it's the second time we've seen these variance reports, and I think this is a step forward. It's nice to have the sort of tables about what's going on up front. I mean, it used to be parked in an appendix at the back, and it was a bit odd. One thing that I would like to see in these reports, and it's sort of under the implications category, is what we're doing in the variance reporting and generally reporting on the strategic plan is sort of like, are things on time? And that's fine. Like, I think that's a useful thing to have in our reporting. But the implications of things being delayed, you know, can vary significantly from not really that important, like it's not that big of a deal that it's slightly late, to very important, like things start piling up and it starts impacting other things and it becomes a huge issue in terms of the magnitude. So what I'd like to see, for example, like if I were just to talk about the CMMS implementation. So under implications, it says, the implication is it's delayed. Well, okay, we got that when we saw that it was pushed off. What does being delayed actually mean? So we don't have CMMS up and running, and that means what? Right? I think that would be helpful, because then we can start to think about, do we need to do something? Like, does this need to be really reprioritized, or is it okay that 3 months later it'll be up and running and it's not a huge issue? I think that would be really helpful. Similarly, the implications of, you know, being behind on some aspects of the industrial land strategy, you know, that, well, what does that mean? And I think that at a certain point, it may not fit easily in a very small table. You know, it might need to be its own kind of standalone piece. And I think I'm just giving this feedback because I think as we get going further down this process, it's helpful to have that feedback at each point. I do want to mention that this is really great to have so few. It's not the case in every standing committee, I have to tell you. Some of them have a lot. So I'm glad to see that this is quite a short report.
Okay. Any comment back on that issue?
Through the chair, in particular with respect to that one is actually, we're working through the process. So it's, I think, a lot more complex a process than even the consultant had worked through. So we're going through that process. There will be a report back coming through that has a lot more of the fulsome explanation specifically to this. And I think ultimately what we foresee with this one is having, when the original milestones were drafted, it was before we started getting into the project. So we have a lot more information now. So we're proposing when we do hopefully bring forward the report and have all that information, we would provide a lot more detail and provide a lot different milestones based on the revised project plan and how that's all going to roll out going forward.
Okay. This has been moved and second. Anything further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Thank you.
Councillor Usher? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, our next item, we can't hear before 1 o'clock, so we'll move to item number 8, which is submission from Councillor Van Holst with respect to a location of a social enterprise. Councillor Van Holst, you're here. What is your request to the committee with respect to this item? You can sit.
Oh, right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Although we're glad to see all of you.
Unfortunately, this came forward with not all the information from the province that's necessary to take action on it. So speaking to the clerk, it was suggested that a good action would be for the committee to refer this to staff to bring that back at an appropriate time. And I would request someone move that. And I apologize for the inconvenience.
So my question to the clerk would be, staff is a very broad group of people. Where do we send that one? Ms. Livingston's department?
There are some implications as well for finance in terms of the tax side of things as well. We could say civic administration, or if you wanted to identify the managing director of both of those respective areas, we could do that as well.
Mr. Hayward, where should we park this?
I would suggest the city treasurer would be the appropriate area.
Okay. We'll send it over to the city treasurer. So can I have a motion to that effect, please? Councillor Usher.
Mr. Chair, I do respect that portion of it, but we don't even know how we're going to handle this. I just wonder, why is it that we wouldn't just take no action at this point in time and leave it to the councillor to bring it back at the appropriate time? Why is it that we want to put it into staff's hands at this moment? We don't know what kind of decision or what kind of discussion we had.
Let me be helpful. I mean, it may come back, it may not. So it'll be referral to staff for further consultation with the councillor and the community. And then if it's appropriate, then it can come back. How's that?
I didn't get I didn't get the first part
Sorry,
of what you were
Councillor,
saying.
if we move no action, that means there's no further conversation with staff. Okay, so the councillor's asking for a conversation and perhaps something would come back. So what we're doing is we're referring it to staff for them to further consult on the matter. No action means no action, which means no action, I guess. Okay, so that's the idea. It's just to have further consultation on it.
I guess what I'm saying is that why don't we refer it back to the councillor until the appropriate time? Why is it that we're putting it in staff's hands? It's still the responsibility of the councillor at this point in time. And until it meets the criteria for it to come back to this committee, why is it that we don't say to the councillor that when is the appropriate time, when you have all the information, you can bring it back?
With respect, we don't have criteria when something's appropriate for the floor or when something's not appropriate for the floor. We kind of have a broad openness to receive things, and you know, we don't have criteria that this is an appropriate matter and this is not an appropriate matter. So without delving into it a whole lot more, all we're doing is asking staff to have further conversation. That may be the end of it, or that there may be more to come back. So do I have a mover for referral? Thank you. Councillor Park. Is there a seconder? Okay. Simply referral to staff for further consultation with Councillor Van Holst. Okay, I'll call a question.
Motion carries 5-0.
Number 9 is a submission, I think, Councillor Usher, or this is coming from a letter to Ms. Graham. I know that you have very much been a part of this, so we'll call this item and put it on the floor. If you'd like, Councillor, and speak to it, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that it was addressed to our staff, but it was addressed to our staff because that's the appropriate thing to do so that we could get it into the committee. But I wanted it to, Ms. Graham and I talk about it, and we decided that we would bring it here to have it out in the open. And I think that one of the reasons that I wanted to address it is because I've always said this, but I think it's important that we continue to recognize the part that we played. One of the reasons that this is here is because the Carol-led program is closing, and I say closing because they're in the last throes of it. Most of the staff for this program is gone, and they're just putting the finishing touches, making up reports to send to the federal government and so on. But this was an extremely successful program, and it entails a lot of people. It entails 20 Canadian municipalities and 38 local governments in the Caribbean throughout about 2 offshore island countries, Belize and Guyana, plus 5 islands. And London played a major role in this. And I think we need to pat ourselves on the back for the part that we played. And part of it is the fact that we did, and the other part is that we need to be encouraged to participate in other programs in the future. We must not say Carol-led is done, and therefore we are finished. We still play a part officially in the Ukraine program, and we've been doing that even before Carol-led. Carol-led was a $19 million program, $19 million from the federal government and $3.8 million in kind from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And it says here all the different people from, many of you know some of the people who participated. Some of them went to the different islands and made contributions. Some went to Belize and Guyana. And I think that some of them you were even recognized right here in council chambers at some point in time. So I wanted to bring this out so that we feel proud of it, and we feel that we understand that we made this great contribution. And I want to tell you that the 38 local governments, meaning 38 different municipalities, small as they may be and large as they may be, they do appreciate the amount of things that that we did in this program. It's one of these programs, just to put it in a nutshell to you, the Canadian government could have taken the $19 million and give it to the the governments of those different countries, not the municipal government. But instead, what they did, they gave it to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and said, you go out there and do the work along with the grassroots people. And that worked very, very well. And you could go to any of these islands and ask them, what is it that some of the Canadian government contributed to? And they could tell you. I myself, I could tell you definitely about the ones in Belize, in Belmopan, Belize City, San Ignacio, Santa Elena, and San Pedro. I'm quite familiar with those, the different projects that were done there. I'm also familiar with some of the ones that were done in Jamaica, physically, I'm talking about. And by meetings and so on, I've given these reports on a regular basis when the person responsible for it in the International Relations Committee of FCM is not available. They always ask me to give this report on Carolette. So I feel proud of it, and I feel happy that this city that I have adopted have played a part in that area of the world. And I want to say to you that there are other projects coming up for South Africa and Jordan. And in the future, there might be other projects coming up for the Caribbean. I want us to feel proud to be able to say that we can participate. And we must always remember that it doesn't cost us very much to participate. And it gives us as a city, but it also gives our members out in the community an opportunity to expand their knowledge and to go out there and offer their knowledge, because people know that they came from London, and people do recognize it and appreciate it. And whenever I speak to those folks, they always refer to different people, particularly from the city's perspective, from our planning department, from our IT department, and from London Hydro, and from the BIT of East Village. Everybody knows her in Belize and Jamaica. So I just need to say that, and I need to bring it out so that we don't feel that we are wasting our time and effort. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on this item? I want to add my congratulations to you, Councillor Usher, for your leadership in this area. Obviously, it's something that's close to your heart, and it's probably in your blood. But also, I think certainly over the years, I've talked with Grant Hopcroft about it. I've talked with Andrea Hallwell about it. I've talked with Sarah Merritt about it. And it's all, you know, not only has they made a contribution, but it certainly shaped them as people. And that's when you engage globally, it shapes you as a person as well as the work that you do, which is valuable there. So I think that's all very positive. I am a little sorry to see that this part of the project is closing down, because there's much work to be done in the Caribbean in this respect. Over the last 20, 25 years, I've spent a fair bit of time in there and recognized the needs in countries like Haiti and needs like countries like Dominican Republic and Trinidad and Tobago, and needless to say, the one that's closest to my heart is Venezuela, which is an absolute disaster, and really the essence of democracy is at risk in that country today. So, in one sense, I'm sorry to see us kind of move back from that position at FCM, and you, as on the board, could take that comment back. We can never afford to be complacent about democracy and building democracy, because it only takes a generation for it to disappear. And I've seen that with my own lives and my own eyes in the Venezuelan context. So thank you for your work, and to all those who participated, we owe them a debt of gratitude as well, because it's sacrifice to an inconvenience and all the rest of it. But we all benefit from it. So thank you very much for that. I'll call the question.
Motion carries 5-0.
Let's just deal with item number 10 if we could, and then we'll go to our 1 o'clock item, the confirmation of appointment to the accessibility Accessibility Advisory Committee from the London District Catholic School Board. I'll take a motion on that, if I may. Call that question.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we'll turn to our item number 7, which is apportionment of taxes on several properties. A riveting item, I'm sure. Mr. Logan, anything we need to know here? Or is it all written for us? Thanks. Jim, you don't look at all like Mr. Logan, but go ahead. Okay.
It's a requirement, you have to be named Jim to work in the tax office. No, there's nothing different about these applications. They're just applications have been made where property has been divided late last year, and Municipal Property Assessment Corporation has not divided up the taxes. They've requested the treasurer to do so, and we're doing it under the Municipal Act.
Okay, I'll take a motion on,
To open the BPM?
is this a PPM? Does not say that on mine. I have no indication that it's a PPM. For procedural purpose, we'll open a public participation meeting on the matter. Can I have a motion on that? Call it.
Motion passed 5-0.
Anyone want to speak to it? Any members of the public? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. I'll take a motion to close the public participation meeting. Call it.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, on the main motion, staff recommendation. Seconder, call the question.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim's. And we'll move now to deferred matters. Councillor Morgan?
I just have one question about one of
Yep.
the deferred items. 1.11, there, in the status, it says an additional council resolution on this matter requires further consultation. Is that we made a resolution that requires further consultation, or you need further consultation for a specific resolution that's already standing? I couldn't look it up exactly what we had done at the time, and I was just wanted some clarification on that.
Sorry, which number, Councillor?
1.11.
1.11. Okay. I mean, 1.11.
Sure.
Through the chair, yes, there was a subsequent resolution of council with respect to flying flags on the flagpoles in front of City Hall as well. So we're trying to look at everything holistically and come back with the appropriate changes that we need.
I thought that request was withdrawn. I know it could still be worked on by the counselor. I was just a little unclear on the status box. That was just a very odd notation, and so I don't think I need to do anything with it today. I just wanted to understand exactly why it was written the way it was.
Councillor Park.
So I just want to provide some clarification. This one wasn't removed at all. It went forward last, yeah, this request wasn't removed. It was two other.
I have one, and it actually pertains to you, Councillor Morgan. 1.3, your request a report back in conjunction on alternative options to counting ranked ballots for which incorporate technology to assist in tabulating. So I don't know if that's on you or on the clerk or where that stands. Thank you.
I have wide shoulders, I'll wear that one. On behalf of the clerk's office, we are actually looking at alternative solutions, and we have a system that we're in the process of commencing testing on, and we will be reporting back at that time once we complete the testing process.
I can add some detail. When this was first contemplated, there were a number of online existing solutions to counting ranked ballots, and part of the concern that we had was that it's very difficult to dig into the actual algorithms online to see how the counting was to test it, and so the process was to move towards building an in-house system through IT, and I know Councillor Van Holst has been working on some stuff too, and that's the type of stuff that is under review. So that's why it's taken so much time, is that the external review indicated that it was very difficult to be able to securely know exactly how those algorithms were actually counting, given there's a number of ways to count ranked ballots, and making something in-house was probably more appropriate.
All right, I'll take a motion on the deferred items, please. Sorry? Okay, sorry, Councillor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to point out a few things. With respect to item number 1.2, it says the fourth quarter of this, but I thought that we had one of this already. This is to do with the stakeholders to establish an award that recognizes local youth. Is this something that we're working with LYAC? And that's the reason why?
Through the chair, Council wanted us to explore. We don't currently have an award that recognizes contribution of youth. So they thought that an appropriate body for the city to connect with and liaise with on a potential award would be the London Youth Advisory Council and other stakeholders, of course, that may have an interest in this, so we can look towards establishing a youth award.
Okay, and I had 1.6, but I believe that Councillor Morgan talked about that already in his discussion in one of the previous rounds. So, my other question is to do with 1.7. Do we have all the information from all the advisory committees that we'll be able to? It says here that a number of the advisory committees have requested adjustment to their terms of reference. Do we know which advisory committees?
There are various advisory committees that have requested minor adjustments, and I know a few of them are currently looking at their own terms of reference to offer suggestions. The direction here is above and beyond what might come grassroots from the advisory committees. This is a look from the top down in terms of whether or not the advisory committee model that council has in place now best meets its needs, and what might be required on a go-forward basis.
Lastly, is to do with the workforce diversity. In 1.13, it says that the civic administration be directed to report back to CSC quarterly reports. But I was tying that in with 1.17 also, and I wonder if we could, I just want to be sure that we're going to get something on that. The third quarter ends in September, and we're almost there. So are we on top of that? Through you to staff?
Through the chair, yes, we plan to report back in September.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take a motion to receive the deferred matters report. Thank you, councillors. Call a question. Thank you.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, folks, I need a motion to go into closed session.
We do have the other added items.
Do we have it? Oh, I don't have that. Clerk, sorry. Oh, my goodness. Oh, good. There's more beer in the town. Okay, item number 11. Or sorry, 12.
Too much beer?
Okay, item number 12, municipally significant event again. Do I have a motion on this?
Motion carries 5-0.
If I could just ask the indulgence of members, when you're adding something, I haven't even seen this. It would be just really helpful to flip it to the chair so I could at least have an idea. I don't even have the added on my desk. So, Councillor Morgan, this is your motion. I'll throw it over to you if you don't mind.
Yes, it's actually a communication from Councillor Helmer and myself, and we did submit it to the clerks. My understanding was it was circulated to the committee. If it wasn't, my apologies for that. That was the expectation that I had. It was submitted last week. So, anyways, so what Councillor Helmer and I have written is in relation to the North American Free Trade Agreement, which has been in the news as of yesterday. At the time we wrote the letter, we didn't know that the United States Trade Representative would release the summary of objectives for NAFTA renegotiations, so this is very timely. We do anticipate that in the letter as occurring very soon, and I guess it occurred before we actually got to the meeting. Which is great, because I've had a chance to look it over since last night, although I don't anticipate not too many people have. The concept on what we wanted to accomplish was that, and for those who have read the objectives, there are certainly municipal implications, both directly for municipalities as well as for their residents, employees, businesses, and citizens. And in Southwestern Ontario particularly, we are always sensitive to trade negotiation, flow of goods across the border. Those terms of international agreements it can impact London and the region particularly. So given our strategic plan of taking a leadership role in the region, and given that this is something of great importance to the country, and recognizing the level of jurisdiction responsible for the negotiations, it is our request of this committee to recommend to council a very specific motion that would involve supporting the Government of Canada in its negotiations by providing information, data, analysis to help inform the trade negotiations with the United States of America, and further that our municipal community and business partners be encouraged to participate in this important endeavor. There are large pockets of information all over the city. Some businesses have, some the city has, some our boards and commissions have, some the LEDC has, some the chamber has. And everybody's doing a little bit within their own confines. Even through my role at the Western Fair, I know some of the agricultural organizations in Southwestern Ontario are actively submitting documentation on how these discussions would impact them. So the city can take a leadership role in ensuring that we have set the intent to be as cooperative as possible, to provide all of the information that we can provide. At the request of the federal government, we can certainly gather whatever data we can gather, and we can set the stage for asking our business community to share their information, whether that's information on their supply chains, their connections to the region's economy, and by the region I mean the states that we trade with on a regular basis, to ensure that that information is available to those negotiating the agreement at their disposal, and to be kind of at the ready to fulfill any sort of requests that the federal government may have of us in gathering or taking leadership in London to provide information. The importance of this, I don't think we can underscore. It is one of the most comprehensive trade agreements that impacts, municipalities across North America, as well as citizens and countries. And the renegotiation could take several different tacks. Again, the Americans have just released their objectives in that negotiation, of which there are a significant number of impacts on the current status of trade. And I'm not suggesting that we enter into those negotiations ourselves, but certainly we can be as supportive as possible by describing the impacts on this. I can tell you just a brief anecdotal story about why this information can be important. In speaking with a member of parliament, they were talking about one of their colleagues having very good information from their constituency. And when they met with one of their counterparts in the United States, they knew what industries had business connections with the same industries in their congressional district, and were able to build those connections. They understood the supply chains that went in and out of those that we're discussing and negotiating on these sorts of things. And so more information is definitely more power for the negotiators. And that's essentially what we're asking today, is that we be at the ready to both provide the information we have, gather the information that may need to be gathered, and provide a leadership role in the city to ask our partners, our organizations, the LEDC, the Chamber, and the business community to also do the same and support the federal government in this endeavor, whether it's through their associations, or whether it's through their local members, or whether it's directly through the trade office and the work that they're doing. So we didn't want to be overly prescriptive, because we certainly recognize the jurisdictional boundaries that we have to respect, but certainly felt that there was a need for us to be involved in supporting this endeavor. I don't know if Councillor Helmer has anything to add.
Well, I think you covered quite a lot there, and I'd be interested to hear from my colleagues, and if we get into a longer discussion, maybe I'll add something at the end.
Well, you're not looking at me, so I'll just speak. I fully support everything that was said here. And I can't add anything to that except to suggest that we ensure that when we pass this motion, we send a copy of it to AMA, to FCM, and also to the membership bodies, including the other organizations of which we are members, and foremost to the Chamber of Commerce of London.
I think it'd be appropriate to send it to FCM, AMO, and certainly to the MPs for the area,
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to thank my colleagues for the forethought in this, and I think it's a good exercise, not only for this purpose, but to really brand the City of London and our regional connections. And I just was reminded of, the dinner we had with the County Council last year, where Mike Moffat came and gave us a talk about what our region had to offer, and it's quite important.
Thanks. I'm glad to see support from colleagues. I thought I would just add one piece, which was, I think it's very easy to, because most of us are not involved in supply chains directly, to kind of not realize just how integrated things are between Canada and the United States. I want to give one example for one thing that we buy through the Transit Commission. So the Transit Commission, London Transit Commission, buys its buses from a company located in Winnipeg called New Flyer. But New Flyer suppliers are all over the place, mostly in the United States. One of the reasons they have a lot of suppliers in the United States is because the United States government has Buy America provisions, and they want to be able to sell into both markets. And so they have suppliers, and they specifically set them up so that some of them are in the United States and some of them are in Canada, so they can meet both the requirements on both sides of the border, so they can sell into both markets. And if you just go down sort of their top 40 suppliers, you can see just how dispersed they are. Some of them are in Ohio, some of them are in Illinois, some of them are in New Jersey, some of them are in Sweden. You know, it's very complicated, and the specific interests that might get affected, you know, they're all over the place, especially in around the Great Lakes. And that's just one place where, you know, our annual purchasing from New Flyer is something like $10.5 million. The city spends a lot of money. And a lot of that is reliant on Canada-US trade working very well. Similar, we're just one actor, you know, across the entire economy. Obviously, it's even more. And so it's such an important issue. And it's, at this point, because NAFTA has been around for a while, it's so integrated across the border, especially for Great Lakes provinces and states, that it's really critically important that we get it right and that we do the best possible job we can when the federal government is negotiating. And I very strongly agree with what Councillor Morgan is suggesting, which is, you know, our role really is to try and provide some information and get people galvanized around that. You know, what can we give to the federal government to aid them in those negotiations? And I'm glad that that's the focus of the motion.
I'll call a question.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one further item, which is coming from our treasurer with respect to a little hiccup we had. Ms. Barbone, you want to walk us through this?
Yes, through the chair, thank you. So this, as we've been monitoring and dealing with the situation, we were able to finally close the loop on this on Friday. So we wanted to basically bring that information that we had because we assumed that there would be questions. So essentially, once we dealt with it, there was 100 accounts that were left that did not get dealt with the exact same way that the majority of the other reversals occurred. So we worked with the financial institutions to ensure that that finally occurred, and that didn't take place Friday morning. So all of the, basically we can confirm that all of the accounts have been refunded, and as a result of working with the banks, they were able to ensure that the NSF fees were very, very limited, and we did not incur any additional costs. So if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I don't have a lot of questions because, to be honest, you and your team, through the chair, have been really supportive in this, quick acting, and have done an excellent job. I ended up having to do some media on this, and it was very easy because after we had chatted, I had realized that you had scoped out an excellent plan very quickly that pretty much addressed everyone's concerns and were at the disposal of the constituents impacted. I saw on social media several complimentary emails to people who had contacted the tax office, and we're very pleased with how quickly it was dealt with, how you understood exactly what had happened, what the impacts were on the constituents, and had the plan to rectify it very quickly. And that level of information was available very, very soon after you became aware of the incident. In fact, by the time people had noticed themselves, you had pretty much scoped out the plan, had initiated the transfers, or the request for the transfers to return the money. So I have nothing but positive things to say about this, even though it was an error. I think, you know, the professionalism and the quality of the people that we employ here are defined when mistakes happen and how they are handled. And this is a great example of you and your team performing better than I think could have been. I don't have any words for it, because it was just, there's nothing negative to say about the way that you handled this unfortunate situation. It was very well done, and my constituents are very much appreciated the work that you did, because I heard from them directly on this, and usually I don't always hear positive things, and especially when you accidentally took people's money twice, you wouldn't expect to hear positive things, but I heard positive feedback about the way this was handled. So thank you for the work that you did. It was a great service to the city and the citizens who were impacted.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Helmer.
In the report, there's a line in there about investigating the file transfer process and increasing control protocols. I just wonder if our staff could speak to sort of more specifically what has changed and what we think the likelihood of this same thing happening in the future might be.
Through the chair, there's so this process has been in place for probably better part of 20 years. So this is the first time that this has actually occurred. So one of the key things is that we've put in place a validation. So that's what we're working on and finalizing. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this, but we've taken immediate steps to look at how we validate that file before it is sent to ensure that the proper file is being sent. So there's a couple of different ways, and we're working with the service areas to ensure that but typically a file count is probably the simplest way to do it. So we're looking at that to ensure that it's, because there is validation files that come back, but there is a delay in that process. So, but one of the longer term solutions, so this is a transitional thing that we've put in place. The longer term solution is we're actually working with the banks, because this process is old technology. There is new processes in place that our bank actually wants us to move forward to on more updated platforms, where each service area is actually going to be responsible for transmitting the files, their own individual files, to the banks themselves, and there's validation that happens instantaneously. So that's the long-term process, and we're starting that initial transition in September with some other pieces that are not, that are in the opposite, where we're putting money into people's accounts and there's an upgrade coming. But this is something that was already in transition, so we've put the immediate step in terms of validating the file initially right now until the longer term process is changed, which we're hoping will be at least started and if not completed by the end of the year.
Thank you, that's helpful. I realize that it's a rare occurrence, and I think Councillor Morgan said it very well when he said, you know, mistakes happen, is how you handle them. That's really important, and I think I've heard the same kind of feedback, which is, despite what happened, people seem to be pretty positive about it. One person was very angry until I explained what we were doing in response, and then they weren't angry anymore. So I just wanted to pass that on to staff as well.
Okay, thank you. I would add my congratulations as well. And as a ward councillor, I had the best thing ever happen. I heard nothing, and that's the best. So.
Motion to receive carries 5-0.
Okay, folks, we're going to go in camera. There's no additional reasons that weren't. Okay. So we're going to move into camera. We're going to go across the hall. We will adjourn from across the hall. There's no reason to come back in here. So if I could have that a motion to go in camera, I'd appreciate it. Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Helmer. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much.
3.